So they're going to do it in a documentary kind of style, or a docu-drama sort of style, telling the history story of it, not actually being in-game like you think most, video game movies are going to be.
It sounds more like you should call it a blockumentary.
It is a blockumentary. What about a game like, I hate to bring it up, but Monopoly? Okay.
Right. Just throw it in the trash.
Just throw the whole thing in the trash. There's no reason that your goofy or comic character has to derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or take up way too much time because, we still want to do stuff. Hey Alex, have you ever tried falling in reverse?
Yes, but what happened was I went into a time loop and then suddenly I was falling in frontward time.
Oh, okay. Well, that's usually the way people do it anyway.
But also, I believe there's a band called Falling in Reverse.
Yes, actually, there is a band called Falling in Reverse.
So I've never actually tried the band.
No? Okay.
No.
Oh, well, you should try it out. I hear that they're okay. But anyway.
Are they okay if you play the music backwards, though?
If anybody wants to try, go listen to Falling in Reverse, but listen to it in reverse while you're falling.
In reverse.
While you're skydiving. Listen to the band. That will work. Okay, anyway, hey, welcome to Total Pebble Knockdown. I am Nathan.
And I am Alex.
And we are currently not falling, or in reverse. We are going straight forward through this episode. Hope you join us.
or we can play this episode backwards, and good luck to you.
That's right. There's a hidden message in there somewhere, maybe. Find out. If you play it backwards and then play it backwards again, you get to hear the whole episode as it is coherent. I got a weekly muse for you. You're going to love this.
That amusing.
Okay, great. I'm going to amuse you. This is bemusing. I saw a movie trailer. That was just released a couple days ago, and you're going to love this. Okay. Tetris, the movie.
Is this actually a movie trailer you saw?
This is a legitimate movie that is being made that has, Taron Egerton. It has actual actors you have recognized.
I mean, I
Tetris,
probably wouldn't recognize them because I don't know who that is, but it's fine. Don't
okay. But at any rate, Kingsman. Did you ever see the Kingsman?
I think so.
Okay, that kid. Okay.
Is this like Tron?
So here's the thing, because immediately when people hear, wait, Tetris the movie, is this going to be like a Super Mario Brothers sort of thing? I got good news for you.
Is this going to be like the Emoji Movie?
No. Actually, I'm super thrilled that this is not going in that direction, and hopefully no movie will ever go in that direction again.
So it's Battleship.
It's not Battleship either. So what they're actually doing with the Tetris the movie is they're telling the story of how Tetris got made.
Okay, that's a little different than what I expected.
I thought so.
Because I was gonna say there's already a Tetris movie that we have, and it's on YouTube, and it is the entire history of the USSR as arranged to the tune of Tetris.
Oh, I thought it was the I Am the Man Who Arranges the Blocks.
That is that one.
It's the same one.
The official name of it, though.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
If any of you listening have not checked out this wonderful piece of internet history at this point in time, it is the entire history of the USSR as arranged to the tune of Tetris. It is fantastic. It is a great video. It's parody and just hilarious. So.
Great. Well, that's not this movie, though. The movie that I'm talking about right now, I think is actually going to be on Apple Plus, I want to say. But it's an actual studio film, and it is going to be about the actual story back in the 80s of Tetris and the designer of it and the Americans that were part of trying to bring it over, and the advent of the Game Boy and trying to and determining how oh, it would be really great if we could actually get the rights to Tetris. We could market it and put it with the Game Boy in the first place. And the struggles that during that time, Russia and the United States didn't have a very friendly relationship, unlike now where we're perfectly fine with each other. But, back in the day where we were public enemy number one, and how do you arrange all of that? How do you figure all of that out? And the political part of that and the international relations part of that in order for people to play with falling blocks.
See, I would have just sent Coca-Cola over there and called it good.
Yeah, you could have their Air Force or something just go over there. There's probably planes. So they're going to do it in a documentary kind of style, or a docu-drama sort of style, telling the history story of it, not actually being in-game like you think most, video game movies are going to be.
It sounds more like you should call it a blockumentary.
It is a blockumentary, exactly.
But also, it just sounds like something you would see like an hour and a half video on YouTube of.
You might also
from somebody
see
like Ahoy. I feel like the trailer should have had, if it didn't, I didn't watch it obviously, just hearing about this now, but I feel like it should have had the Tetris theme song fading in.
Oh yeah. Well, they do like one of those epic renditions. You can kind of hear it in the background, like those epic movie trailer renditions of the Tetris theme song.
Oh, so it's
in there,
arranged by an orchestra.
Yes.
God.
Where they have like the wubs, that kind of thing. Yeah, they got that kind of version of it. So that's fun. I do have to say, like, when I first saw that thing pop up, I thought to myself, so is this going to be like there are blocks invading from the sky and you have to figure out how to eliminate them? Because that feels like the kind of studio movie that I'd expect. And then I realized, oh no, they're going a little bit more cerebral with it and trying to do an actual documentary. Does that even seem like something you'd want to watch?
Maybe. It depends on the length. Depends on the cinematography.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really into historical stuff like that, so it could be interesting.
Right.
I'd rather, I don't think I'd want to watch it. I think I'd want to listen to it on YouTube while I'm working.
Yeah.
And not able to look at anything,
What I started thinking about, though, when I was looking at this is, well, that was a really interesting idea of, how to make a video game movie, because I think people really just try to do the characters and they make the storyline into the movie. But the storyline behind some of these is kind of interesting. I started wondering, are there any other, gaming stories, like the actual story of how the game got made, that might be an interesting movie? The only one I can think of that they did was, they had King of Kong, which was, a documentary from a while back about the guy that kept the high score for as long as he did and the fight for it. Yeah.
That sounds like maybe a half-hour show, not in a full feature-length movie.
Right.
Unless you turn it into a series and you're like a Netflix original series where it's taking that story and turning it into episodes.
That would be pretty interesting.
Which make it more action-packed than it really was.
Yeah. Ooh, you know what they could do that with? That would be a really interesting Netflix series, is if they did it with Star Citizen. It's the behind the scenes. It's the whole lineage, every year of the development of Star Citizen up to the present.
Oh,
day.
it's just the view of being someone who backed Star Citizen and just waiting for it to come out and checking it and being like, no new updates today.
It's a slice of life show, but set to the backdrop of a Star Citizen backer. You're
right.
Watching it. Perfect. We should totally do that. That's a new project. We'll pitch it to Netflix. They're constantly looking for new projects.
Let's pitch it to the people who are making Star Citizen, because they clearly have money they don't need.
They have enough for a full production budget, whole series. No Man's Sky would be a kind of good one to do as a dramatized story about what Hello Games went through and the comeback story. That feels like, an actual emotionally resonant thing that people might be able to do. Or maybe Bioshock, even the behind... Bioshock would be good as a movie as the game of the actually just doing Bioshock as a movie
Sure, but there's also like if you did a documentary of that too, you could do of the game before the game as well.
Oh, yeah.
Inside of Mine did a really good one about There's Something in the Sea, which was an ARG for BioShock.
Right.
Which if you haven't watched that and you enjoy BioShock, you should go watch Inside of Mine's video on that. It's pretty cool.
Okay, I'll try to remember that.
I'm talking to anyone listening too, not just you.
Oh, see, I thought I was special for a second. Did you ever actually play BioShock?
No, I have them now, but I haven't played them.
Oh, I recommend you play them. At least, if nothing else, at least the first one, because it is
at some point. It's on the backlog.
It's on the backlog. Yeah, no, it's it was well known for a lot of the themes that it put forward and how it addressed some older ideas in a new, more practical way. It was very interesting. I think that the idea of taking some of those games and talking about the story behind the story or behind the game is an interesting framework. I kind of wish that there were more titles about video games that took that approach than trying to, make the Mario movie.
I mean, the Mario movie was bad.
Yeah, and I don't know if I hold out a lot of hope for the new one either.
But it was entertaining. I will say, I did enjoy the Mario movie.
Sure.
Just as a film, not as a Mario IP. Like, it was an interesting movie. It was a little weird what they did. But, like, entertaining, campy, yeah, 100%.
It's a prime example of dystopic fiction. If you think about it. I saw the trailer come up and I was like, oh, I gotta tell Alex about this.
Well, I've been enlightened. I'm gonna go listen to Tetris theme song as sung by the Pig Without a Face or whatever the fucking YouTube channel is now.
Yeah, you can do that. You could do that. You could spend 2 minutes and watch the trailer for the Tetris too.
No, the song is like 5 minutes long.
So
I'll watch that and watch the trailer twice on mute.
You watch the trailer twice on mute while you listen to the audio of how the man version. Okay, well that sounds like an interesting experience. Anyway, so folks, if you're out there listening to this and you have seen the trailer, what did you think? Does this seem like a really bad idea or a really good one? And
also,
yes,
put the link to the trailer in the description below.
Yeah.
Because then if you haven't seen it, we got a link for you.
And hey, if you could create any documentary style story for a video game, which one would it be and why? That's your homework for the day here on the show. It's Crit Think time.
Ooh, critically thinking.
Yeah.
What if I fail?
Well, then you go to the corner. And you stay there.
I've got the corner right behind me.
So actually, you're already in the corner. So you've already... So, there's only up now. You can only go up. So I was thinking about another one of those philosophical discussions that we have a tendency to get into once in a while on a rare occasion.
Oh, like that one trolley problem.
Yeah, or the million trolley problems. The one about the lobsters. Anyway, this time, though, I wanted to take one you're probably familiar with called the Ship of Theseus.
I am familiar with the Ship of Theseus. For people who aren't familiar with the Ship of Theseus, however,
yes.
Did you want to give a brief rundown?
I can, or you can. Do you want to do rock, paper, scissors for it?
No, I'll let you go. You seem prepped for this already, so...
Okay, so basically the idea of the Ship of Theseus is... If you got the Ship of Theseus and it was in a... Is it in the museum usually? I don't know. Anyway, you just have the Ship of Theseus. And you take a board and you replace one of the boards of the Ship of Theseus with a new board, like you're repairing old boards. Eventually, there's going to be a point where there aren't that many original pieces, or possibly no original pieces of the actual Ship of Theseus. And the question is, if we've replaced every single part by part, is it still the Ship of Theseus? If I've kept replacing it, does it still maintain what it was?
So here's the better version, I think, of this, is that if you've got the ship, for instance, in this case, the Ship of Theseus, any item like this, if you take and replace the parts, but you keep the old parts.
Okay.
So you take the boat and you replace a piece at a time until you've replaced the entire ship with new pieces.
Got it.
But you've kept the old pieces and put them back together over here.
Oh.
So which one of these two ships is actually the Ship of Theseus?
Got it.
Because now you've got the one that you originally took all the original pieces from and rebuilt it, and the ship that you've replaced all the pieces on, which is now basically a new ship.
Got it. Yeah, exactly. So you've essentially cloned a ship. You've made two ships of Theseus, but one of these, it has to be a real one. Yeah. Okay, so those are two versions I think we're familiar with, either the actual replacing of them because they start to wear away, or the trading away to recreate it somewhere else. Like the thieves. Wasn't that the whole idea that the thieves are constantly stealing pieces by pieces to rebuild it somewhere else? The reason I bring it up is because I wanted to ask a question about that in terms of game design. Because a lot of the games, role-playing games that you might have seen, games in general, are built on a framework of something else before it. You know, you take something and you say, hey, I'll take this and I'll bring it over here and then I'll modify it. I'll change it around. When does it stop being the thing that it was originally and it starts being the new thing that can be called something different?
Yeah.
That's the real question here. So, your initial thoughts. When do you think that process starts? For you, when is something a new entity?
For gaming, it's a little different than the actual, like, Ship of Theseus. Tabletop, for instance, you can take a whole system and transport it to a new version and just update it, but then it's not quite the same thing, because you're not just replacing parts of it with new parts, you're changing the parts, so they're not quite the same.
Right.
Video games, however, you can definitely like update the systems to be more modern, to be more efficient, better at what they do. That might be a better example of it.
Okay.
Maybe it's when you take Hammer Editor version 1, for instance, for like Valve gets stuff, and update it to the version 2 or something like that. Right. It's like it's a more powerful engine, it's better, it's the same thing, but newer.
What about, for instance, like new Dead Space?
Haven't seen much about it, but apparently it's a good remake.
It apparently it is a really good remake in comparison to the original Dead Space, where what they did is they kind of kept the same layout of Dead Space, but they updated a lot of things. Like, one, it looks better and everything, and they changed some of the game elements so that it was much more fluid in how you develop your character and everything like that. However, that one and the 2008 version are both called Dead Space. So now what we have are literally in very similar fashion to the Ship of Theseus. We have two Ships of Theseus known as Dead Space.
I would say similarly when they reboot games and you give us like DMC after we've already had Devil May Cry.
Right.
But I think that's just a naming convention at that point, because God of War, like the new one, is still named God of War, but it's not like a remaster of the old one.
It's a completely different game. They just started calling it that again. Exactly. We're putting new parts on something that was originally there, and it's still called the same thing. I guess the thing is, though, when we're talking about like a video game like Dead Space, the original game exists, the new game exists, we know that these are different entities, even though they are related to each other, and they can have object permanence together. They can both exist in the same realm. My big question, though, is if we take a system and we start tweaking it and start moving it around and everything, When does it stop being the original thing? For instance, here's one that maybe you could talk about with a little bit more expertise. D&D 3. Okay. Eventually we have D&D 3.5. It's still the basic system, but you've changed some things now.
Yeah.
That has led it from 3 to 3.5. So when does it become 3.5? When does it go from this thing to this thing?
Oh, that is when they print a new book.
Oh, so they just printed a new book altogether.
Yeah, because there's Player's Handbook 3.0, and they're like, we need to make some revisions for it, we're reprinting it. And this is 3.5. They modified some of the layout slightly, the book, fixed some things, and they had a better cover for it too. I think I had a 3rd edition rulebook at some point too.
But see, 3rd edition has all but been forgot. Like, no one talks about playing 3. If
we should do an episode about that sometime.
Yeah, that'd be
why 3.5 and 3 are things that exist.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Yeah, that would
do some research.
You move from different versions, 3 to 4 to 5, and you keep some of the original stuff in it, and it modifies over the course of time, so they rebrand it because you've put new things onto it. But as you kind of mentioned earlier before we started recording, what about if you had like a 3.5 and a Pathfinder? There are some differences, but...
Definitely. So the difference is it's not quite the Ship of Theseus, because you're taking the whole ship, moving it over here, and then going like, we could use a few more sails and a few less masts.
Yeah.
Because Pathfinder changes some of the things how D&D approached it. They added their own flares. They took some stuff away that might have been confusing. I haven't played Pathfinder in a while, but they definitely took like the 3.5 SRD, the Standard Resource Document, and went, most of this is fine. We're going to add a bunch of new classes, some new races. We're going to change a couple of these functionality things that we want to be different. I know you've played a little bit of Pathfinder Kingmaker, I think.
Yep, yeah.
Where it's got a couple of the things you probably weren't familiar with, like the command move bonus or something.
No.
And there's stuff like that. So it's definitely they took the things they liked and kept them, and took things they didn't like and changed them or replaced them.
What about a game like, I hate to bring it up, but Monopoly? Okay.
Right. Just throw it in the trash.
Just throw the whole thing in the trash. There's about 700 versions of Monopoly. They all remain Monopoly. When does a game that takes that framework stop being Monopoly anymore?
Well, usually the games that take the framework of Monopoly just rebrand it as like a different thing. Or it's one of the 17,000 different Monopoly titles that are just Monopoly with a different, like, brand.
Right.
You know, like My Little Pony Monopoly, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Or like specific towns that have their own version of the game, because they're like, oh, it's the tourist version. Great. Who wants this? Nobody wants this. Stop printing it.
The trap card that I would have thrown in here at this point is that technically, Monopoly wasn't actually Monopoly to begin with. This is actually kind of a good analogy for the Ship of Theseus. Maybe they should have called it the Ship of Monopoly. But once upon a time, there was a game called the Landlord's Game. And it was the game that came before it was actually, like, published. And the game was basically the same, except the intention was completely different. The intention behind it was completely different. Originally, when the lady who created the Landlord game created that, it was the idea of an anti-landlord game.
Right.
That was trying to show the problems with landlords and was attempting to get people to understand how they should work together to try and make the system work. And then that, with the same basic framework, ended up being sold as Monopoly, where you have to screw over your friends as quickly as possible so you can accrue massive wealth.
The problem is capitalism.
Monopoly is... The story behind Monopoly is also a great story about capitalism. Oh my god! They should make a movie about Monopoly, and that could be the documentary like we were talking about before.
They can make Mr. Moneybags actually with the money bags in a monocle.
The monocle, the money bags, the whole thing. It would be amazing. Who would we get to play that? I don't know. Russell Crowe, he can do anything. Do you think that there is an actual analogy that we could make between the Ship of Theseus and the evolution of game design?
Maybe somewhere in there. Part of it.
Part of it, yeah.
Not sure what the analogy would be.
I guess, do you crib in games entirely from the original format? Which
Sure.
you shouldn't do.
No.
But I guess that does kind of bring you back to the basic question, though, is the Ship of Theseus itself. Right?
Yeah.
Like we've traded all the parts out from the Ship of Theseus. And now there's another Ship of Theseus. So
Yeah.
if we're saying that, you can't really just like wholesale rebrand a game and have two versions of the game, then theoretically that also means that the Ship of Theseus you can't do that with in the first place. So
Yeah.
so which one is the actual ship?
I think smarter people than us have tried to answer this question and not done so well. So
You know what I'm gonna say? I'm gonna say that it's the difference between like Coke and New Coke.
it's the amount of Coke you're getting for your dollar.
Absolutely. How much can you snort and how quickly? But no, also the idea of like the ship that we've traded all the parts out for is the original Coke Classic, and then the new ship with all the new things is New Coke, and they're basically the same thing. To the outside observer, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, but if you really got a close-up look, you'd be like, something's different between these two things.
I thought it was the ingredients, but that's fine.
It might have been the ingredients too. But then again, the ingredients in the Ships of Theseus are also technically different, even though they look
guess.
the same.
Yeah.
So there you go. The better analogy to the Ship of Theseus has nothing to do with games. It had to do with Coca-Cola the entire time. We talk about all sorts of topics here. Anywho, this is a crit think. We usually pass a question along to everybody else. Should there be a Ship of Theseus game?
Yes.
Great. You let us know in the comments down below. Bet you didn't think that was going to be the question, but here we are. Alex, I was going through some Reddit forums because I was bored. And
Great.
And when I got over there, I was looking at some stuff about tabletop RPGs, and a question came up that was asked very recently, and it was about when you're trying to engage your players at the beginning of a session. And the question was, what creative and fun methods have you seen to help players remember important story events or characters between sessions?
Okay.
So, basically we're talking about, you get everybody around the table, you start talking about the, what happened during our last session, but you don't want to just address it as, tell me what you did. Okay. So how are we going to engage our players and try to figure out, collectively what we're going to be doing?
I mean, I don't think it has to be like super engaging, like fun. Like the fun is the game.
You don't want it to be
itself.
fun anyway.
No, I don't. I mean, I typically what I'll do is ask my players for a recap of what happened last session.
Right.
One way you can do this is if any player wants to take notes, for instance.
Sure.
It's like, all right, maybe if anyone takes notes, they can have a one of the tokens you give out in 5e.
Oh, yeah. Inspiration?
Yeah. Thank you. That.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like, hey, anyone who takes notes, you get inspiration at the start of the game.
Sure.
Something like that. Give them a little incentive to remember the stuff, for instance.
Certainly.
Another thing you can do is maybe you have your players do a character journal, if they're into that.
Yes.
Your players, your characters could be journaling of what's going on and be like, all right, cool. Who remembers what's going on? What are your characters doing? How did we end off?
Sure.
I don't think it has to be super engaging or crazy, but having some put on the players to figure out what's going on, and to remember where we are at the end of a session is usually nice.
So in my game of 1879, Andy had put together this thing at the very beginning, which was you could optionally keep a character journal, like you were saying. Now, if you do that, you would get, for every session that you're keeping this up, 100 adventure points. Adventure points are basically the currency if you're familiar with either 1879 or Earth Dawn, which it was based off of. The Ship of Theseus that it came out of, essentially. Adventure points are what you use for every kind of character advancement in the game.
Okay. Other systems just use EXP you can spend, for instance.
Certainly. In this particular system, you get these adventure points, and you could either use those to upgrade stats, skills, give yourself durability, a whole bunch of things like that. You would get 100 of those for every time that you did the journaling, and then we could make the journals public, and we put them onto a forum so anybody who wanted to follow along with the game could actually watch it. I found that was a really engaging thing, because now when I'm playing the session, I have to also start thinking like, oh, right, I got to take notes because I got my journal, and I got to put my journal together. And then
that sounds more like a job than fun for me, though.
That does feel like a job, but I do get adventure points for doing it, so it's kind of worth it, we're going to say. The thing is that I found really interesting is that other characters would be able to give their perspectives by putting their journal entries in too, for the ones who wanted it. We had 3 of us that were actually doing this. And so I'd go through the forums and I'd be able to read them publicly and see like how from their perspective they were looking at stuff. And a lot of times it would be stuff that I had forgotten about, like the stuff that maybe I wasn't really involved in a scene, so I hadn't been paying very close attention. They would write about those in detail and in depth. So I feel like that process gave me a lot better overall understanding of what we had just done for those few moments where and I hate to say this, sometimes I would tune out during some sessions. Especially when you go into a lot of digression and people are, off in the corner doing something and you're not there.
Yeah.
So that does
Well,
happen.
your character shouldn't know anything about that then.
Exactly. See, for me, my metagaming part of that is, if my character's not in the scene, I probably should not actually be fully aware of what's going on because I'm not there. So,
yeah.
On the one hand, I'm like, should I be paying attention because this might become relevant? Or should I not be paying attention because I'm not there?
Right.
That's a whole other conversation. But for this one, I was thinking about, you could do the journaling kind of thing. Depending on the kind of setting that you're doing, I think that trying to do something more in-game world would make sense. If you're trying to do, like, a campy sci-fi sort of setting, I think somebody even mentioned this as, like, a last week on, and just try to, like, do one of those old, like, 50s-style sci-fi,
Captain's Log.
Captain's Log. Stardate. Yeah, do that for sci-fi settings or something like that. For if you've got somebody who's really musically inclined and is playing like a bard in your fantasy setting, have them do a poem recapping the whole thing. Make them do the work. Why should you? You have your players recap that. That actually does bring me to a question I'd like to ask, though. Do you think it is on the GM to remind the players of what happened, or should the players be the ones to remember what their characters have done?
I think the GM needs to be aware of things and make sure they know what's going on, but I also think players should be invested enough in the game to not put all the work on the GM like that.
Right.
If you're playing the game, you should be aware of what's going on, where you were, where you left off, things like that. Because putting too many roles on the GM is something that parties do sometimes.
Yes.
Maybe not as much as they used to.
Yeah.
But I know, like, before I've GM'd a game and been like, all right, I need to get the group together. I need to schedule it all out. I need to remember all the stuff, make the game, do everything, and the players just come and play.
Right.
And it's like, it's a lot. It's a lot of work to do, and it's not always, I feel, like a fair workload distribution.
Yeah.
It's like, if we're all here to have fun, we should all be doing a little bit of this work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, yes, the GM's gonna make the world and tell the story or whatever like that, but I think the players can offload some of the difficulty. Like, either a player can bring snacks, or a player can set the group up for whenever you're gonna play, like do the scheduling stuff, or maybe the player can do the recap. You know,
Right.
everyone has a role in the party. Everyone also has a role at the table.
Right. If we're going to treat a role-playing game like a collaborative world-building or storytelling experience, then it makes sense to have everybody actively engaged in remembering what that story is and keeping tabs on it. I think that that's not a huge ask for people, especially if you're playing the game. I mostly say all of this because when I start running a game, I'm just letting everybody know I'm probably not going to remember exactly what all of your characters did. I'm hoping that you do. Or that other players remember what your character did in relation to it. So hopefully that's true. I would say that something that was helpful is if we had like an open Google Doc for some of the play sessions that I've had, where people can write notes collectively. You know, like all of the players can come in and they can write notes in their own script or in their own color, so that we can keep track of that a little bit better. And I think just from trying to keep everybody on the same page and remember what everybody else remembers kind of framework, I think that that's probably a good thing. Technology helps when you're doing that online. If you don't actively have a journal. I don't know if that's necessarily fun or creative, as the question asks, but I think that it can be cohesive, it can be helpful to remember what's going on.
I don't think it has to be fun. I think it has to be useful.
Yeah.
Like, it has to be non-intrusive and useful and just easy to get players to do.
I would also say it should probably be fairly quick and efficient. The reason I say that is because I have been in sessions where it feels like half the session is going over crap that we had previously done before you actually get into the session. That has a lot to do with digression as well, where everybody just kind of keeps riffing off of the stuff that you did and why, and get into the weeds, and then it's like, yeah, but you're not playing the game. I gotta wait like an hour before we can play the game. And then
I had somebody the other day say somebody I work with that doesn't play D&D or hasn't, but it's like, I want to learn. And I'm not really into the habit of teaching newbies right now. So, but they're like, if we ever play D&D, I want to have one of this goofy shit. And it's like, no, if I wanted to play goofy shit, I'd play with goofy people.
There really has not been a campaign or a game that I played that I didn't end up being a little bit wacky.
Wacky players are fine.
I'm a wacky guy. I mean,
wacky characters are fine.
You've played with me. You've seen Max. Max I would consider to be kind of a wacky character. Kind of a goofy character.
A bit weird. He's a little strange.
A little more of a comic relief kind of character. But there's no reason that your goofy or comic character has to derail the whole thing.
Yeah.
Or take up way too much time because, we still want to do stuff. So I would say for recapping and all of that, I don't really want to do anything that's more than like 10 minutes for a recap. 5-10 minutes should be pretty easy to just kind of remind people where they're at. Hopefully you know where your characters, like the individual players, know more or less what their character's at. If they're actively engaged, they should be able to do that. If they're not remembering what their character did, that's a bigger problem. Because it makes me think that they're not actually engaging very well with the story or what the campaign is. And that might be something to address. That's something to just kind of like keep in the back of your head. Because again, just reminding everybody, my intention is later in the year to actually try to do, run a game of some kind. And when that happens, I will get very, very nervous if people don't know what their own characters are or do will make me very concerned. I guess the question that I'll ask you, and by transitory properties, the rest of the people watching this is, what questions should you be asking your players at the beginning of the session to kind of get this whole ball rolling? What question would you ask of them?
I feel like the questions you'd want to ask are, all right, where are your characters, or what are your characters doing right now? Or say, all right, where did we leave off?
Yeah. Where in the story? What chapter marker are we in?
Yeah.
Right?
As long as you don't leave off a session in media res, you know?
Yes.
I feel like you shouldn't do that. Don't leave off in the middle of an action scene.
Sounds a bad idea.
I mean, you can if there's a lull in the action, like if you're doing a big thing and it's like, all right, you're taking a 5-minute breather between this sneaking section you've done and the next section in this dungeon, for instance. But like, don't be like, all right, we're in the middle of combat and break. You don't do that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But something like where are we? What are we doing? You know, what's going on?
Yeah. Also, an even worse idea, just in general, is don't break a session in the middle of a flashback.
I feel like somebody did this at one point.
No, but probably somebody did. But I was just thinking when you were talking about like in media res, where it'd be like a moment out of time, like that kind of thing. Somebody at some point I can just see, like in the middle of a character's flashback, completely out of time from the rest of the game, said, okay, well, that's all the time we have for tonight, so we're gonna have to pick this back up.
You know what I think would be a great way to start and end sessions would be if each session took either the place of like one day or like a period of time and ended at when the players are going to bed.
Oh, okay.
And then started again when they were waking up.
Yep. Starting and ending at the beginning and end of your day does make sense.
Yeah, because then you could be like, all right, so it's the beginning of the morning, you know, good morning. You've woken up to the sunshine. You can just start everything like it's a new day. Like,
and you have a to-do list.
Yeah, but the problem is with
chores.
that is then the session before you would have had to do all the things you need to do and been like, all right, I'm going to bed. You couldn't end in any action sequences. You couldn't end if you're not camping. It's like, all right, we have these things, we're doing them, and so, like, you can decide when you want to stop, but you need to find a place to rest.
Right.
Kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is doable. It's probably not as convenient as it sounds for a lot of game sessions.
Depending on how much you want to do in a day.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a single day. It could be like, all right, you're spending like a month traveling, so it's like,
right,
whatever.
Right. Yeah. So the question that I'm passing along for this is just, what would you ask your players to start with, and do you have a creative way of actually engaging people at the start of a session? And I'm mostly just going to crib whatever you say so that I can use it myself. So feel free to give me ideas, and that will be the idea Ship of Theseus that we go on for this one.
There you go.
It's, these all tie in together now. We have taken blocks and rotated them around, and then we've used them to create a separate ship, and then we've recapped how we did all of that. So I think we're ready to get out of here.
I think we can take this ship out of here.
That's right. Come sail away with me. If anybody wanted to come and visit the Ship of Theseus that is Total Pebble Knockdown, or Knockdown Pebble Total, where could they go?
Hopefully to the first one, which is totalpebbleknockdown.com.
Yeah, I don't think there's an IP for the other one. But anyway, when you go over there, feel free to just check out some of the other content that we have in addition to Total Pebble Knockdown. And you can also click on our Patreon banner. You can find additional content over there and early releases of anything that we put up there. So check that out. It's not a bad place to be. And you can also find us on every podcast app known to mankind. And you can also find us on various social media networks. I am at Titanium.
I am at EXP Limited, and our show is over at Pebble Knockdown.
Yep, so check us out there for all of your pebbly needs. And with that, I am ready to get myself a Tetris and remove 4 lines of blocks all at once.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a quad kill right there.
That's a quad kill right there. Oh, you can keep your Counter-Strike, because that's the real deal right there. Thank you all for joining us on Tetris Talk. It's a new segment.
Thanks for coming to my Tetris talk.
Yes, Tetris X Talk. and we will catch you on the next one. Goodbye for now.
Bye.